Yo, who's that there? Why, it's Abe Lincoln, and he's currently the 16th president of a slave-free country. But let's rewind a bit, shall we?
Wake up, bub. It's time to get a job. Yeah, just get out there. I never want to see you again. Woohoo! Freedom! Hey, Nancy, we can finally have sex again.
Abe had a mutual interest in politics, and he decided to apply for a legislator in the federal Congress, which at the time was in a big debate. You see, 80 years ago, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, stating that all men are created equal and should be treated equal. But then some people saw some slaves working their ass off and asked, if the Declaration says all men are equal, then why are they being treated like dirt?
Because they're the color of dirt?
That sounds about right. It didn't go exactly like that, but eventually slaves were allowed to accept tips. But a part of the U.S. that didn't agree with this was the South. Also known as the Confederate States, the South and the North of the U.S. were very different at the time. The North of the U.S. was quickly manufacturing goods, while the South was rapidly growing and selling crops. Of course, they were too lazy to grow the crops by themselves, so they had slaves do it for them while pocketing all the money. As you can guess, with all these differences, both sides had different thoughts of slavery as well. The North didn't depend on slaves, so they started an activist movement, whereas the South heavily relied on their servants and were expanding slavery by the thousands. With all these differences, the North and the South's friendship began to unravel. They always argued like,
"You're fucking insane for supporting slavery.
You're a total asshole for trying to free our slaves."
yeah, the South actually thought the North was trying to free their slaves. In all, there were 11 Union states and 11 slave states, but then a new state called Missouri wanted to join the pack. And in an event called the Missouri Compromise, Missouri was officially declared a slave state. It went a little something like this.
All right, you might have gotten Missouri, but from now on, you can't have any more Confederate states across this border.
That ain't fair.
Life ain't fair, bitch.
It seemed like the slavery problem was fixed, but actually it wasn't. Because the more states that joined America, the more unequal the Confederate and Union states got. I'm surprised those idiots couldn't agree to differ or something. But hell, this is America. You can't have a peaceful ending here. It's always like, first the two sides get into an argument for a stupid reason. Then they officially declare war on each other. But for some reason, neither of them is willing to give up or die. And in the end, they're like, to hell with it. If we can't kill each other, we might as well be friends. Truly American. Later, a senator said Kansas and Nebraska should be slave states, but a lot of people didn't agree with this because they were obviously above the Missouri Compromise border. But instead of doing what they did last time, they let the citizens decide for themselves if they should be slave states or not. But that was an even bigger mistake because this happened.
Kansas and Nebraska will be free, and so will every other state.
That ain't fair.
Life ain't fair, bitch.
Soon, Kansas and Nebraska both decided to ban slavery, but the North and the South's relationship just kept getting rockier. Oh, and remember Abe Lincoln? He's currently the chief of the newly established Republican Party. It was a big hit. But you know what else is a big hit? Lincoln's wrestling career. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler. Don't have nightmares. The North saw Lincoln as some sort of idol, while the South considered him as public enemy number one. In 1857, a decision known as the Dred Scott case totally pissed everyone off, saying that black people are stupid because they're black, and black people don't deserve the same privileges white people get. It was widely regarded as one of the crappiest judgments the Supreme Court has ever given. Now we should all give a hand to the blacks that had to go through so much suffering to get where they are now. After being whipped, tortured, starved, sold, and separated from their kinsfolk, the slaves in the South finally had enough. By the thousands, the slaves started escaping to the North. Unfortunately, the Southerners caught wind of it and they started hunting the slaves down. So now they were basically playing a game of run or die. A lot of leading black figures helped the slaves get to the North through the Underground Railroad. Oh, and in case you didn't know, the Underground Railroad is like multiple secret routes beneath the earth that automatically leads to the North. You know, by now the North had 18 states while the South only had 15. You'd think that would be good enough for those greedy pigs, but no, it had to be equal. It's funny when you think of it. The southern states are always making a big deal that it isn't equal, but this is where I point out you currently own 4 million slaves. Oh, and guess what? Out of Republican support alone, Abe Lincoln made the other candidates in the 1860 presidential election look like a joke. And with that, Abe Lincoln was the U.S.'s 16th president. But the South didn't really take this happily and declared the Confederate States their own country with their own government, separating from the U.S. If there was any chance of reuniting the states, there was one thing that had to go: President Lincoln. However, earlier I said you can't have a peaceful solution in America. Well, in this case, it would be absolutely correct. After the South declared their own country, they got rid of national U.S. property lying there. For instance, Fort Sumter, an Army fortress on the shore of South Carolina. They didn't really have many supplies to defend themselves with. The Confederates surrounded the base in no time. You'd think there would be a more nonviolent way to end this, but 2 seconds later they blew the base to bits, which was the South's solution to most problems. Anyways, after they catastrophically totaled the fortress, it marked the start of the Civil War, about time as well. The South saw it in a different perspective, though. They thought that now that they had proven their strength, Lincoln would just give up. But if I know anything good about America, it's that if they get punched, they punch back. Lincoln assembled thousands of bloodthirsty troops. It's not that they wanted to defend their country, they just wanted the satisfaction of snapping someone's neck. A general named Winfield Scott developed a strategy known as the Anaconda Plan. They sealed a blockade around the Confederate states, preventing anyone from getting in or getting out, and no one getting in means no more supplies. After that, the U.S. would control the Mississippi River, cutting the Confederacy in half. Battles raged all across the Union-Confederacy border. A particular group was plowing their way from Washington to the Confederate capital, Richmond. Their plan was to seize the southern capital, then take over the rest of the Confederacy. Of course, not bumping into any obstacles was going to be the unrealistic ending. So pretty soon, their long march was interrupted by an army of Confederate soldiers practically waiting for them. They got ready to fight in the First Battle of Bull Run. Believe it or not, there was a giant viewing deck on top of a hill so rich people could literally spectate the battle. Everyone seemed to be taking this fight as a joke, but little did they know it would result in total chaos.